Hello and welcome to the LiveFitNow podcast. This is episode 10 and I cannot wait for you to hear it. It's a fantastic episode full of lots of inspiration and information, and I hope it leaves you feeling motivated. My guest today is someone I have known for a couple of years now. I met him when he came to me to prepare for his latest adventure. This has been highly requested, as rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean is the kind of thing that grabs people's attention. The Ocean 5 team set the world record with their crossing this year, but this is the latest in a long line of adventures, from climbing mountains and going to both the North and South Poles. Amazingly, this is a sideline, a hobby perhaps. He has been the CEO of 4 world-class business brands, including BMW and Porsche. He is a leader, serial entrepreneur, businessman, speaker, author, and all-round inspirational person. Welcome to the LiveFitNow podcast, Kevin Gaskell.
Thank you. Great to be here, Vicki. Great to see you again when you're not forcing me to lift weights in the gym. So.
It's a far more pleasant experience. So your last adventure was rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. What inspired you to undertake this challenge?
Well, I mean, you said it in the intro. I've walked to the North Pole, the South Pole, climbed the world's biggest mountains. And so I was thinking, what could be the next challenge? And all of the others I have done with my son. He started when he was 18. He's 30 now, but we've done them over that period of time. And I said to him, hey, Matt, I've got an idea. I said, how do you fancy rowing across the Atlantic? And he said, no. I said, oh, why? Because everything else, he just said, yeah, great, let's go. No. And I said, why? And he said, because it'll be pain, and more pain, and I'm not doing it. So I thought, okay. So I kind of went off the idea. And then I was speaking at a conference actually in Monaco, at the Monaco Yacht Club, to 200 or 300 people involved in the marine industry, business people and sailors and all sorts of people. And somebody asked me after the talk, they said, what's your next adventure? I usually talk about business, but I use some of the photographs from the adventures to illuminate points, to keep people awake, frankly. You know, I'll show us hanging off a mountain and say, decision making, it's one thing sitting in an office, it's another thing when you're hanging 5,000 feet above a crevasse. So I was asked, what's your next adventure? And I kind of said spontaneously, well, I'd like to row the Atlantic Ocean, but I can't find anybody to come with me. And of course the audience laughs and it goes quiet and we move on. And then after that session, one of the guys in the audience came up to me and said, hey, were you serious? I said, yeah, I was serious. And he said, well, I've got 2 mates and we've always wanted to do that, but we know we couldn't put the project together, and you could put the project together. These guys are half my age, and they said, we can row, we can navigate. We'd love to come with you. Can we do it? So we met as a team and we interviewed each other. And I said to them, what do you want to do? And they said, we want to set the world record. And I laughed and I said, well, that's great, guys, but you don't do that with somebody my age. I mean, you know, if you want to do that, we'll do a crossing once, and then you can do it again with 4 guys of your age. You're all 6-foot strapping lads in your 20s, and you can really go for it. And but let's do it first. Let's get across and see how we go. And so that's how the team was formed, and that's how the project started.
And would you say it's been your biggest challenge so far?
I think in some ways it has been my biggest challenge, expedition challenge, because it takes such a lot of planning. You know, you've got to get 5 guys into a 24-foot plastic rowing boat with enough food to last nearly 60 days and get people trained and equipped and get all of the technology and marine equipment and navigation equipment and life-saving equipment and everything pulled together with strict scrutineering. The harbour masters, strangely enough, don't let you just set off across the Atlantic unless you can prove you've got all the certificates, all the training, and your boat is up to muster. So we had to pull all of that together. So just getting to the starting line was probably as big a challenge as crossing the ocean. So yes, it was a big project.
And when you finally left harbour, did it feel like you expected it to feel?
Well, the thing is, the guys had said to me when we met, which was over 2 years ago now, right, we'll go this year. And I said, no, you won't go this year. We won't go this year. And this is 2 years ago. I said, no, we won't. Well, I said, no, it'll take 18 months to pull this together. And at first they didn't believe me. And then the phone rang, and it was my son. And he said, what's this? You're on Facebook with a team to do the Atlantic. I said, yeah. And he said, well, what about me? I said, Matt, I've asked you and asked you. You didn't want to come. He said, well, it's real now. I want to come. So I said, okay. Well, I have to ask the guys because it's a 4-man team. We can't just ask somebody to leave. But we're going to be 2 years in preparation. And who knows? Somebody will get injured, or frankly, somebody might change their mind, or they get posted overseas for business, or whatever it is. So we agreed to train together. And then we realized in the rules that there was a 5-man class. So that's it. Suddenly we're a 5-man team, which was great. And Matt being in the team and the guys asking him about preparing for expeditions, because of course he's done whatever it is, 8 or 10 as well, they appreciated how long it was going to take to get ready. So the preparation was a huge part of it. Once we started on the ocean, well, that just became another world. And you know, we had a shore-based weather router. So we have a guy who's a specialist in reading weather maps and reading weather forecasts and giving us advice on, frankly, how to get around the storms and if there is wind, how to use it to our advantage instead of trying to row into it. Because we could only row into about 15, 16, 17 knots of wind. After that, it would blow us backwards. So this guy, hugely competent forecaster, said to us, look, when you come out of the harbour, I want you to head north. And we didn't expect to head north because we were heading from Spain to Antigua, and that's west. He said, no, I want you to go north because there's going to be a storm coming in, and you're going to catch the edge of it, and it's going to blow you along, and you'll get a really good start. So sure enough, there are 35 boats in this race. We leave the harbour one after another. They all head west and we head north. And we're thinking to ourselves, is this really a great idea? Off we go. We're enjoying it. It's a nice day and we've got a breeze behind us and we're enjoying the rowing. And, you know, after 2 years of training, it's great to be out on the water. And so the day progressed and we did 70, 75 miles. And we thought, this is good. We've got the wind behind us. Stokey was right. We're going well. And then the storm kind of shifted position. Now, I've never been outside an Atlantic storm looking in, but I'd certainly never been inside an Atlantic storm looking out. And it was brutal. And, you know, we're going into winter, so it's pretty hairy on the weather, and it was brutal. And that first night absolutely hammered us. The ferocity you cannot describe. We got hit by a wave at one point, and these waves, I mean, just roughly speaking, if you imagine a big oak tree, the scale of a big oak tree, and then imagine that there's a wall of water as high as that oak tree, and we're being hit by that. And it's just bouncing us around the ocean. And we got hit at one point, and we've got 2 guys rowing, and we're using carbon fiber oars, which are designed to take tons and tons and tons and tons of weight. And we got hit side on by one wave, and it just snapped our oars. It just broke them in half, just simply snapped them in half. So with 2 oars gone on the first night, and we're expecting to take 45 days to cross the ocean, we've got 2 spare oars in the boat. Well, now we've got no spare oars because we've got 2 broken ones. So wow. Once we got to sea, it was a different world.
It must have been a really quick adaptation of what your, as you say, what your world was, because you couldn't behave as you would on land because you were constantly exposed to the elements. I mean, was there always some people out on deck, or did sometimes you have to go into your cabins, which certainly weren't spacious, were they?
No, the cabins weren't really cabins. They're cubby holes at each end of the road. I mean, the boat is 20 foot long. It's 24 foot at the waterline. And you've got 5 big blokes on there. So 5 6-foot blokes is 30 foot on a 24-foot boat. We could just about get 2 people into each one of the little cubbies, as they're called. But you are lying, touching head to toe, squashed in. And of course, you've got kit in there and all sorts of stuff in. There is absolutely no space. It is not a luxurious place to be. But we'd made the decision. I have learned from other expeditions that it's very easy to come up with an excuse every day not to go out. You know, you walk to the North Pole or the South Pole. Our coldest day at the South Pole was minus 48 centigrade. Now that's before the wind chill. So with the wind chill, it was about minus 60 centigrade. There's always a good reason not to get out of your warm sleeping bag and start walking again. There's always a good reason. Oh, the weather will be better tomorrow or something or something. But if you're not careful, you spend days and weeks in your tent. So we were very clear that we would row through everything unless it was absolutely impossible. So for most of the race, we would be either 2 or 3 rowers at a time. We do 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And in those 2 hours off, you sleep and you eat and you wash and you fettle the boat and you wash your clothes and you make water. And there's a whole lot of stuff to do in your 2 hours off. But we decided that we would row at all times, whatever the conditions. And there was only one time that we didn't row, and that was in that storm where we were so buffeted, we just concentrated on survival. And then we had another day slightly later where the wind was blowing against us so strongly that we dropped what we call a para anchor, which is effectively a parachute. You drop that into the water, and that acts as an anchor, sea anchor, and it stops you going backwards. Well, it doesn't really. You move backwards with the water, which is going at maybe 1 or 2 knots, whereas the wind might be blowing at 20, 25 knots. So for most of the time, for the 35 days, 19 hours and 50 minutes it took us to cross, we're rowing. There's somebody rowing, and it's usually 2, and it's very often 3.
Fantastic. And would you say you have any particular memorable moments from the crossing? And would you say it's more of a physical or a mental challenge?
You know, the challenge is both. Physically, it's very demanding. You're rowing for 12 hours a day, every day. So if you can imagine sitting on a Concept 2 for 2 hours, you're not going full chat. That would be an exaggeration, but you're going quite firmly for 2 hours. And we allowed ourselves to take a sip of water every 20 minutes and a bite of food every 40 minutes. So you are rowing. Mentally, you've conditioned yourself to the fact that you're going on this expedition. And we had discussed it beforehand, and Matt and I, my son and I, had given our experiences of surviving in very hostile environments and explained to people that you will have bad days. There will be bad days, and there will be occasionally very bad day. And that storm, you know, our first night, that storm was a very bad day. But we decided as a team that we would start as friends, we would end as friends. And then our motto was, be kind. Everybody's going to have a bad day, because being roused from your bed at 3 o'clock in the morning in the rain and being asked to get back on the oars when you've only had an hour's sleep, let's say, and you've been rowing for 20 days and you've had an hour's sleep, and hey, come on, Kev, it's your turn back on the oars. It's very easy to get grumpy about that, but you've chosen to be there. You knew what it was going to be like. you knew how tough it was going to be because we trained. We spent days out in the ocean when we were training before we started the race. It's uncomfortable, but it's only going to last for 2 hours. And then you can have an hour's sleep again and get some food. And so we, as a team, I think we're very good at helping each other through the mental challenge. We didn't have anybody get scared or lose it. About halfway across with sleep deprivation, the biggest challenge, honestly, was hallucinating. I hallucinated a lot. I found the sleep deprivation quite tough. And I imagined I was in all sorts of places. I was rowing along in the middle of the Atlantic and I could see Tesco. I knew I was near Tesco because I could see it. And so I knew I was rowing out to the car park of Tesco. I mean, this is sitting here now, this is bizarre. And of course it was nonsense. And then there was another day when I was rowing and I was speaking to my daughter who was sitting next to me. Now, my daughter's a married woman, but she was sitting next to me on the boat and I was chattering away to her. And my roommate said, "Who are you talking to, Kev?" I said, "I'm talking to Sarah." And he said, "Where is she?" I said, "Well, she's here next to me." "Righto," he said, "righto." And, we just carry on. And of course, the following day, I realized that, of course, she's not there. So we have these moments where we faded in and out of reality. But because as a team, we had decided we would help each other through these points, it never became, it didn't lead to any difficult situations because you're still rowing. You're just talking to your daughter who's not there. So that's fine. Just keep rowing. So mentally, we did get a bit scatty at times. Yes.
And is there anything in particular you feel personally that you took from this challenge compared to your previous ones? So is there anything special about this one?
And the thing about this one, rowing across an ocean is relentless. There is nowhere to get off. There is nowhere to take a day off. There is nowhere to take a break. You are being tossed around all of the time. It is relentless. Whereas, I've climbed mountains and there will be days up mountains when, if the weather's particularly bad, we'll hunker down in our tent and we'll have a day off and we'll get maybe 15 hours sleep. Well, you can't do that on a boat because you're on again in 2 hours. It's 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Every day, all day, every day. So it's relentless. And I think what I took from this one was a recognition that, look, I'm 61 years old. I'm relatively fit for a 61-year-old, but I recognize that I can't recover at the rate I used to recover when I was doing this kind of stuff in my 20s and 30s. And so I have to kind of try to pace myself a little bit and protect my body just that bit more. And there were the small injuries. We really are small injuries. They're very painful. Blisters on our hands and blisters on our feet. And I had probably 5 days where I could hardly bear to stand on my feet because they were blistered, and then the blisters got infected. And my son, who's finished a medical degree, gave me a hard time and forced me to look after myself more. But those are short-term injuries that will, if you care for them, you will overcome them. It was the long-term fatigue of rowing basically all day, every day for a month and a half that I learned that when I do my next one, I will have to do more training for stamina, for long-term, and preventing myself getting any injuries in that respect.
I very much noticed you said when. So have you already chosen your next challenge?
No, I mean, look, we're actually a bit stuck for what to do next because, as you said in the intro, we've done both poles, we've done the mountains, now we rode an ocean, and it's kind of what's next. And people say, "Oh, parachuting, yeah, done that. Scuba diving, yeah, done that." And so one of the guys came up with the idea of a kite buggy. So this is a little three-wheeler go-kart thing. and you have a power kite that you fly as you sit in the little. So as an individual, there's one person on a 3-wheel buggy,
Yeah.
and a power kite, and so we've been kicking around the idea of power kiting across the Sahara Desert, which seems like a good idea, but we'll see. People have
Desert, that's a
tried.
new location.
Yeah, well, people have tried it. Nobody's done it. There's one team who ended up going down the coast because they couldn't get across the desert. But something like that is a big old project. And then the other thing I quite fancy is something like the Paris-Dakar Rally, actually driving a car through interesting terrain. So
Yeah.
playing around with those ideas at the moment.
Well, they're great ideas. And actually, I would love to ask you at this point, when and why did you start challenging yourself in this way? Why did you start going off around the world and pushing your personal limits?
It kind of grew. It grew progressively. I grew up in North Wales, and my sports, I played a lot of cricket, and I played cricket for my county, and then I played cricket for Wales. So I enjoyed cricket, and then outside the cricket season, my hobby was walking in the mountains because we lived in North Wales, and so we would walk, and then I learned to climb. And so mountains were where I started. And then it went from Snowdon to something bigger than Snowdon, to something bigger, to something bigger. And we just progressed. I just progressed. And then I got my son involved when he was 12 when we went on our first expedition together. And I laugh because I have a photograph of him. And the rucksack he's carrying is bigger than him. I mean, it's just huge. So he started when he was 12, and we've just kind of gone and done it. I don't know. There was never the next one will be more exciting, and then the next one will be more exciting, and the next one will be more exciting. And I need something also to take me away from business because, for my business life, I'm currently chairman of 4 companies, having run businesses all my life. And when I go on holiday, if I were to sit on a beach and read a book, which I do occasionally, I'll do that for 3 or 4 days before I get bored. But if I sit on a beach or sit by a pool and read a book, I'm thinking about business. And I do find it quite tough to switch off. So when you go and do something where you really have to switch off, or you're completely focused on what you're doing, and surviving is a pretty good thing to focus on, then I find that's very relaxing. And I have a friend, he's a guy called Pete Goss, and he's a very famous sailor. 20 years ago, he did the Vendée Globe, single-handed race. Very, very competent guy, very competent sailor. And I used to talk to him about what he got out of these single-handed round-the-world races. And he said, Kev, it's wiping the hard drive. He said, it clears all the clutter. He said, when I come back, life is very simple and straightforward, he said, and the noise is gone. And, there's a lot to be said for that. When we finished the Atlantic Row, we'd cleared a lot of clutter. And we finished as friends, and it was great. And we broke the world record, which was even greater. We were thrilled. But, it's a real break from everything that goes on day to day. So that's why I do it.
Good a reason as any, why not? And do you have a favourite moment from all of your adventures? So 1 or 2 moments that stick out more than others?
I think, look, I'm very fortunate in that everything I've done from him being 12, 13, 14 has been with Matt. He didn't come with me. I've been to the North Pole twice, and he was too young to come the first time. But when we went to the South Pole, he was 18, so he came on that trek. And then I could tell he wanted to do the North Pole. So I said, come on, we'll go. I'll come back with you. We'll go back together. And I think standing at the North Pole, and there was just him and me and a professional guide, a guy called Alan Chambers, who's a friend and a guide. That was a special moment because we'd done both poles together. And it was just, to share that with your son is very special. That one sticks out. And actually, you know what? I think the ocean row has been such a great experience. I miss it now. I mean, we've been on land for a couple of months, and I do actually miss it. And I know the other guys do too, because we talk about it. And the team was called the Ocean Five because one of the lads, he decided that if we do one ocean, we're going to do all five. And I laughed and I said, yeah, good. I said, let's do one first and see how you feel. And then if you still want to do the next four, we'll carry on. And it's interesting, when we finished, I said to them, right, who's up for the Indian Ocean then? And they all said, you can get lost. Well, no, we've done enough. I took about 3 days on shore and they said, you know that Indian Ocean? So there is a race, there is a Pacific rowing race. And it goes from California to Hawaii. It doesn't cover the whole of the Pacific, but it's 3,000 miles, California to Hawaii. And I've sold our boat. It'll be collected as soon as the lockdown finishes. But I spoke to the buyer yesterday and I said, listen, I said, I'm selling you the boat, but I'm selling it to you on one condition. And he said, what? I said, that when you've done the race, because they're going to do the same race later this year, I said, when you've done the race, you offer it back to me, first refusal to buy it back from you, because that'll be another year on from now. And we might just be thinking about getting ourselves into shape to do the Pacific. So thinking about that as well. It is a wonderful experience. It is a truly wonderful experience to be in the middle of the Atlantic, 1,500 miles from land in any direction, with not another living soul for hundreds of miles around. And we didn't see, people say, oh, look out for the big ships. We saw about 3 big ships at a distance of 10 miles. That was it. But to sit out on deck and row, and the magnificence of the sky, the stars that you see are just extraordinary. We don't have any lights on the boat. We turn the navigation lights off because we don't need them. And nobody's anywhere near us. We have an electronic warning system. We have a radar, effectively, that tells us if another boat gets within 10 miles, so we'll flip the lights back on. But generally speaking, we don't have any lights on. And it's just the most wonderful, magical experience. And of course, there's the wildlife, and we saw sharks, and we saw dolphin, and we saw whales, and we saw seabirds, seabirds hanging around 1,500 miles offshore. It's quite extraordinary. So it was just the most magical experience.
I can only imagine, because it really does, like, you set that scene, and there are so few people in the world that have experienced something like that as well, which makes it even more special. And I can see why it didn't take you all too many days to want to experience something like that again, because normal life is nothing like that. And it's so different when you challenge yourself in that way, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It strips away the layers. There's nowhere to hide. And we had, as a team, we'd agreed, as I said, we would start as friends, we would end as friends. We would be kind. We only had, I only had one, argument's too strong, one disagreement with one of the chaps over a particular point, and we were just going on to row together, and something happened, and he said something and I took exception to, and then we talked about it. And I gave him a little bit of coaching on what I felt would have been a more appropriate way to approach that topic. And he listened and he said, you know what, you're absolutely right. And to be fair to him, he came back on the next row shift and he said, I've just recorded a 5-minute video to myself, coaching myself on not doing what I did to you, because he said, I know I do it all the time. I said, yes, you do. He said, right, thanks for the input. And that was as close to an argument as we got. It wasn't really an argument.
Wow, it's amazing. I guess it really does show, firstly, the importance of communication, because those sorts of things can build massively, and just how much, when you strip normal day-to-day things away, you can become more acutely aware of how you act and behave, not only to yourself and how you talk to yourself, but how you treat those around you as well.
Yes, and it comes down to some of the points we agreed before we started, which were the disciplines. we will never be, we said, we will never be late for a rowing shift. So if you are due to sit in that chair and row at 2 o'clock in the morning, then you should be sitting down doing your first stroke at 2 o'clock. That's not 2:02 or 2:05 or 2:06 or 2:07. That is 2 o'clock. And the guy who I swapped with, so we kind of each lived at opposite ends of the boat. There were 3 at one end and 2 at the other. So I would come out and swap with a guy at my end of the boat. And the guy who I swapped with every time, he had a watch which had an hourly beep on it, which honestly, if it had been my watch, it would have driven me mad. But every hour it went beep, beep, beep. And so I knew that I had to be in that seat pulling on those oars before his watch went beep. And there was occasions when I was still sitting down, or if it was a bit choppy, I was just working my way around him to get to the seat. Because climbing in and out of a rowing seat on a boat that's only a meter wide that's being tossed around in the ocean is actually a bit tricky. But that was the discipline we lived to. We will be rowing at 2 o'clock before the beeps go. We will be kind to each other. We will not blame each other if something goes wrong. And the oars broke. There's no point getting grumpy about it. The oars are broken. Our water maker packed up. We have a desalination plant built into the boat. So we're taking seawater in and turning that into fresh water. And that's what we use to rehydrate our freeze-dried meals. That's what we used to drink. It's what we used to wash in. And that backed up at one point. Well, fine. There's no point getting grumpy about it. I'm an engineer by training. So I stick my head into the galley and work it out, and I fix it, and away we go. So it really does strip away, and also it strips away the layers of stuff and noise, because there is none out there. But also, that experience reinforces to you the value of communication, that you must communicate clearly, because people are stressed, even though they don't feel stressed as in work stress. They're stressed because they haven't slept properly. They may be stiff and aching from their row, or they haven't eaten properly, or whatever it is. There are different stresses. And so we kept our communication. We try to be very straightforward in our communication, just very clear, very simple. And to give you an idea of the dedication, Christmas came. We set off in the beginning of January. At the beginning of December, and we got to Christmas Day, and we'd packed. I'd actually packed some gifts for everybody for Christmas Day, but we were so busy fighting the weather and the winds at that point, and we didn't stop. We simply didn't stop for Christmas. We just kept going. We thought we'd give ourselves 10 minutes off. We didn't have a minute off. We go, Merry Christmas. Yeah, great. Keep rowing. And the break we took was on New Year's Eve, when we gave ourselves 20 minutes off. And that was the only break in the whole crossing. And in those 20 minutes, we opened our gifts, which were Terry's chocolate orange, which you have Terry's chocolate orange every Christmas, so that's what it was, and a silly hat. And then we had our Christmas lunch, and our Christmas lunch was reindeer stew. This was my son's humor, a reindeer stew. And it was rehydrated reindeer stew, and it was very good. All except one guy on the boat who's vegetarian, so he didn't have reindeer stew. He had reindeer's grass stew, or whatever he had. But, that was the only break. In 36 days of crossing, we took 20 minutes off. That was it.
Was the food challenging, or are you just so busy focusing on survival and getting across the ocean that it's just something you have to do to stay fueled?
I'm not a great foodie. I genuinely am not really interested in food. In my business career running premium brands, I've been taken to the best restaurants in the world. And I can honor, this is absolutely true. What goes through my head as I go into these restaurants is, here's another 4 hours in my life I'm not going to get back. That's the absolute truth. I am absolutely not interested. So food for me is fuel. But because Matt and I had done so many expeditions and tried so much expedition food, we have our favorites, and we have a brand which we particularly like. It's called Real Termat. It's our favorite. And it's got a wide range, and the flavors are great, and it works well, and the packages are strong, and. So the reasons we like it. There was plenty of choice. So we could eat 4 or 5 of those meals. Each of those meals is about 800 calories. And we had enough to eat 4 or 5 of those meals a day. Now, I didn't. I ate 2 or 3. And then on top of that, we would have our snack packs. And again, because Matt and I have done a lot of expeditions, we're aware of what carries well and what doesn't carry well. And the fact that your snack pack is actually, it's a motivator. You know, you look for, for me, it was Christmas cake. Christmas cake's fantastic because it's moist, it's high in calories, it's tasty. Christmas cake with a cup of coffee, wow, that was the height of luxury. And then one of the guys in particular, he took Kendal mint cake, which kind of sounded like a good idea and turned into Kendal mint soup by mid-ocean. And if you can imagine sugary soup over everything, it was pretty horrific. So the food was great. The Termat stuff is great. And our own snack packs, which we choose for ourselves, was great. And it wasn't difficult. The biggest challenge is boiling water to put into your meal. You know, people say you can make these up with cold water. Yes, you can. With hot water, they take 12 minutes, 15 minutes to rehydrate. With cold water, they can take 3 hours, and you're eating a cold meal. And honestly, having got soaking wet through and frozen, going into my cabin, the last thing I want to be doing is eating a cold meal. So heating the water was the biggest challenge because the boat's all over the place, and you know, as much as we try and make gimbals and plates to balance on and all sorts of things, it's still very challenging to boil a litre of water in a very confined space with a boat that's all over the place. Very challenging.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people questioned why the race happens, you know, over winter for us. So what was the temperature like? Was there a big variation or?
You know, the temperature, when we set off from Spain, it was coolish, and in the evenings it was cool. We needed to sleep we didn't sleep in a sleeping bag. Well, we did, but it was a liner bag, you know, it's a single layer bag. You needed that or else you couldn't sleep because it was too cold. But as we approached the Caribbean, it did warm up. And so it kind of flipped between hot and cold. If you had the sun on you, there's no shelter on the boat. You're not allowed, rules of the race, you're not allowed to have shelter because that could be misconstrued or misappropriated and used as a sail in some way. So there's no shelter on the boat. So yeah, the temperature was all right. I mean, there was one point where we got capsized. We got picked up by one wave that hit us from the stern. And then a big wave, just when we're up in the air, a big wave hit us on the side, on the beam, and it just turned the boat upside down. Now we're 1,000 miles from shore. There were 3 of us rowing. Me, my son, and a guy called Sam rowing. The other 2 guys, Will and Chris, were in the cabins, which are sealed. They're watertight. You know, we lock them in. And this boat just got picked up, turned upside down, and dumped back in the ocean. We 3 rowers got thrown, and I don't mean tipped, I mean thrown out of our seats. We flew over the safety lines at the side of the boat, over the top of them, and landed. When we got to the end of our tether, we're tethered to the boat at all time. We've got something like a 3-meter tether, which is fixed onto the boat at all times. And again, whilst that's a race rule, we know some people thought, well, they'll get away with it. Well, we didn't. Our rule was, immediately you come out of the cabin, you clip in, because, well, this capsize just explained to us why. So the boat was thrown in the air. We were thrown out of the boat. We landed in the water, and my first thought was, oh, well, that's warmer than I expected it to be. Actually, very cold. And I was underwater, and I looked to my left, and I could see Matt, my son, swimming up, because we were, I don't know, 2-3 meters underwater, swimming up to the surface, and I could see the boat there upside down in front of me. And we popped up out of the water. The boat had started to turn. It was on its side now. And I looked at each end of the boat, and the windows out of the cabin, I could see a face pressed to each window of the guys who'd been sleeping, whose floor had suddenly become their ceiling, who were thinking, what on earth is going on here? And we're in the water. So they're upside down, we're in the water. And there's huge waves all around us. And Sam scrambled back onto the boat. And Matt and I stayed in the water to protect the oars, because we didn't have any spare oars. So we stayed in the water to stop the oars getting swept. If they get swept under the boat, they break back on themselves, so that makes sense. So the guys came out of the cabin, we got the boat back upright, and then we got the oars out of the water first, and then we jumped back in. But, you know, there are moments which stand out as being pretty special, and that was one of them. And we got on board, and the boat was great, and we kind of shook ourselves off and laughed about it, and off we went again, carried on rowing, and that was it.
Incredible. So, all part of the journey.
Yeah, it's all part of the journey. I mean, look, we expected it to happen at some point. When it happened so quickly we didn't see it coming. It literally up in the air, upside down, bash in the water, and that was that. And that was less scary than we had one day where the waves were coming against us, and they were very big breakers. They were very big swells with breaking at the top. And again, if you imagine something as big as the side of a house and you're in a little rowing boat, well, it's as big as the size of two houses really, but long, as long as a street. And you start going up this thing nose first, and it starts to break on top of you. So the boat appears to fall over backwards, and would do if you didn't pull to one side. So we all run to one side, or lean to one side, and the boat will slew around and come back down a hill, and then you go again. But yeah, that's more scary, because you go up the face of this wave and it will just dump the boat backwards on top of you, and that's not a good place to be.
No, it doesn't sound great. So are there any skills that you have taken from business or you put back into business when you've come out of these expeditions? Are they transferable?
Yeah, they are transferable. I think you've got the hard skills and the soft skills. So the hard skills are around project management. They are around being commercial. So, you know, we had a checklist. To give you an idea of how complex a project this was, our checklist that we checked on the final day before we set to sea was 413 items. So there's an awful lot of stuff to check on the boat, because once you set to sea, that's it. It's no good getting 100 miles out into the ocean saying, I wish we'd got a widget, or I wish we'd brought, or I wish we hadn't brought. So the organization of the crew and the boat was critical. It was probably more critical than the physical training. Actually making sure the boat was completely seaworthy, that we had everything we needed, that we had spare parts for everything that could break, and then for the critical things like the water maker and the lights and the navigation systems, we had spares for spares. So actually planning the project is directly transferable from business. Having a vision of success. When I run businesses, I talk about what is our vision of success? What will we look like when we are successful? And we discussed the vision of success on the boat. It was very interesting because we didn't have complete agreement. And even 2 days before we set to sea, we couldn't agree whether it was more important to us to enjoy it and have fun or to break the world record. And we debated this back and forth. I remember we sat one evening in Spain having this conversation. And the truth is there was a balance, because we wanted to go for the world record. But at the same time, if suddenly a pod of whales broached somewhere nearby, we said we would stop and we would enjoy the moment. So that was the compromise we found. So the crossover is about project planning, a clear vision of success, an agreement of the principles, discipline, be kind, If we do see whales, we will stop and we will watch them, and we will enjoy that moment. But at the same time, the process has to work. So we do change seats when we say we will change seats. The food is prepared accordingly. That all the disciplines on the boat run properly. Then you have the soft skills. And the soft skills were about the way we related as a team. And again, that's directly transferable from business. And, look, in business, I've been a CEO now for 29 years, CEO or chairman for 29 years. And, I was extraordinarily lucky. I was running Porsche when I was 32 years old, and I'm now 61. So I've had 29 years of leading businesses. But when we got on the boat, the soft skill here is you have to park your ego. I was not the skipper of the boat. Skipper of the boat was Chris Hodgson, because Chris Hodgson, in his day job, is an executive officer on a super yacht. That's what he does for a living. And so he was the best guy to be the skipper of our boat and to call the shots and to have the final say on the navigation and on how we operated. And that was great. Honestly, for me, it was wonderful because I didn't want that responsibility because I'm not a sailor. So the soft skills then were about working as a team and communicating clearly. And everything I've spoken about for the last few minutes, being very honest and very open. There is no space on that boat not to be honest.
If there was one skill, and I feel like you almost left us with that, if there was one skill that you think, if anyone wants to challenge themselves, whether it be in business or to do a challenge like you have done in the past, is there one skill that you should try and cultivate in order to be successful in either of those things?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a skill, Vicki. I don't know if it's a skill. I think that I get approached by a lot of people who want to talk about their businesses, and I say to them, what does success look like for you? And they say, what do you mean? I said, what does success look like for you? You're asking me to help you run your business. To achieve what? What does? And they say, oh, we want to grow at 5%. I said, no, forget all of that stuff. Forget that. That's simply a means of getting there. What does success look like to you? And, people have different motivations and different ambitions. But if you want to be truly successful at something, then sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and write down what it looks like when you get there. Describe it. Because if you're not 120% committed to that vision of success, you won't achieve it. Because people say to me, oh, Kev, you're so lucky. And I said, what do you mean lucky? Well, you've done all these expeditions. I said, well, you can do them. Oh, no. I said, no, you could do them. You've got just as much opportunity as me. But there are things that I will sacrifice in order to do what I want to do. And somebody said to me the other day, what kind of things do you sacrifice? I said, well, let's take simple things. I have never seen Game of Thrones. I have never seen Coronation Street. I have never seen these big TV programs and shows that people talk about. I've simply never seen them. Because if you want to spend 3 hours of your life each day watching that stuff, great, fantastic, good for you. I hope you have a wonderful time. I spend those 3 hours planning my expeditions or building my companies or whatever it is. And so there are things I'm prepared to give up. TV is a trivial example, but I spend the time focusing my efforts on achieving my vision of success. And that's what I do. And then I go out and I do it. And so most people say, oh, I wish. Well, don't wish. Do it. What is it that's holding you back? Just your determination. That's the only thing. What was it that, who's the famous Kung Fu fighter? Remember the guy's name, but he said, if action followed knowledge, we'd all have a six-pack. What's his name? The famous film star who was the Kung Fu fighter. More exercise, it's, that's what it takes. Well, if you want to do an expedition, work out what it takes. Or if you want to build a business, work out what it looks like. Or if you want to do something else, work out what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. It's what is it that you want to do. Because only by following that through will you achieve it. And, we all have dreams, but dreams without action are just dreams. It's the action that converts them into reality. That's what I say to people. You can do anything you want. You have the same number of hours in a day as Leonardo da Vinci or Einstein had. You have the same number of hours. So use them. Focus them on achieving your vision of success. That's it.
Mindset over skills. And I'm going to do a little bit of a promotion for you at this moment, because your book called Inspired Leadership, I think would be a great read for anybody. I think where you lay out a lot of those principles, and if people do want to find out a little bit more about you and your history, it would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, the book came about because I speak at a lot of business conferences, and I teach people how to run businesses or how to become entrepreneurs or how to go and do what it is that they want to do with their lives. And I'm not a motivational speaker. I say I'm an inspirational speaker because my job is to help you become inspired to achieve what you want to achieve. And I was always asked after the, stand on stage for an hour, and people say, oh, where do I find that stuff written down? I said, well, I don't know. And so I thought, I was asked that same question 5,000 times. It was probably time to write it down. So I wrote Inspired Leadership. And it's great, it's sold really well, and people enjoy it. And I get lovely comments back from people where they say, it's helped me to change my life. And it's a mix of structure and approach, plus the stories from my business life and my expedition life. And, there's also, I'd like to think, I hope, a huge dose of humility in there, because I don't get it right all the time. And there's a big trick to being successful is realizing that you take 3 steps forward and you have to take 2 back sometimes. It doesn't matter. You've still taken 1 forward. Now let's take another 3 forward. So in the book, I describe how sometimes it goes wrong. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's all part of the learning. It doesn't matter. You don't have to injure yourself. You don't have to hurt anybody. Do not extend yourself financially to achieve those goals. Find the way to get to where you want to be. That's what I talk about.
Wonderful. And I think actually the fear of failing is quite often the biggest reason why people don't bother to try, because they think, well, if they can't get it right, there's no point trying. But I'm sure there's not a single experience you've been through that you've not learned something from. So it's worthwhile trying, because you never know what might come next.
Well, I say to people, look, if I stood on stage and just told you every time I'd failed, I'd need 3 days, not an hour. I'd need 3 days. And I could tell you every time it's gone wrong, and every time we failed, and every time we've had to step backwards. And it's about recognizing that failure is not failure. Failure is learning. I've tried something and it didn't work. Okay, let's learn from that. Let's try something different. And then let's learn from that and try something different. And, we learn so much. Listen, we jumped into that boat thinking, not thinking we knew everything, really not, absolutely not, but thinking we prepared well. We'd trained hard, we'd organized ourselves well. Man, we were learning from day one. Once we got out in that ocean, it wasn't like we expected. It's just different. And now I'm giving people who are doing the race, they call me and I'm giving them tips. And I'm saying, listen, look into this, this, and this. And they say, oh, we'd never thought of that. I said, no, nor did we. But I can tell you now, having been through the process and having been through the experience, these are the things that made the difference. And some we were ready for, and some we weren't. And the ones we weren't, we had to fight our way through. And, a simple stuff, a case in point, we had the wrong seat cushions, the wrong ones. And we came off that boat so sore we could hardly walk. Now, I don't want anybody else to go through that, so I give them advice on which seat cushions would work. So, it's little things. We all learn from doing. You learn from doing. And in my book, I've tried to put in there examples of where it hasn't quite gone right, but we've still learned from it, and where we don't blame individuals. If people are not pushing to the point where it goes wrong, they're not pushing far enough. So it's all about learning together. It's about sharing the experience. So that's why I wrote the book.
And a wonderful book it is. And I guess I just want to wrap up with you now. And if there was one thought that you can leave the audience with, one thing to take away, what would that be? And it can be related to anything that you would like.
I think it goes back to what I said about clarity of vision. What is it that you want for yourself when you are successful? What does that look like? And that could be anything from I want to break a world record and row in the ocean to I want to be a mum with 2 kids, happy, healthy, and live in Newbury and enjoy my life and be relatively fit. And that's wonderful. To other people who say to me, I want to be a multimillionaire. How do I do that? And I always say to them, listen, the multimillionaire comes from being successful at something else. What is it you want to be successful at? So for me, it's always about pulling back to what does your success look like? When you're successful, describe it to me. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And if you're honest with yourself and you can write those things down, I believe people can achieve extraordinary things. And I've seen people achieve extraordinary results. And when I'm asked about running teams, I said, look, my belief is very simple. Ordinary people, and we're all ordinary people can achieve extraordinary results if they know what they're setting out to achieve. And so far for me, it's been great fun working with teams of ordinary people and achieving extraordinary results.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I have literally scratched the surface as to questions I'd like to ask you. I barely even got on to the business questions that I was hoping to dive into, but it really has been a wonderful conversation. I will get all of the links to your social media accounts and your website so people can click through and find out a little bit more about you, and if they want to get in touch with you. So I'll pop all of those details into the show notes. So I just want to take a moment to thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, because I know people are going to be fascinated to hear your story.
Well, Vicki, you're welcome. And can I just repay the compliment and say thank you to you for the 18 months that you spent forcing this fat old man to do enough exercise to be able to row across the ocean, because without you, I wouldn't have got there. So thank you so much for your support and your help and your encouragement, and for kicking my backside occasionally. So it was great. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening to episode 10 of the LiveFitNow podcast. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm going to pop all of the links to reach Kevin Gaskell and follow him online, and his book into the show notes. So don't forget to click and take a look. Thanks for listening. Until the next time.